Just let me know how the sound goes, and we will get started. Hey everybody, I have been super excited and ready and waiting to do this live stream for a while as I waited for the Digitakt 2 to arrive, and it arrived finally, which I am super excited about. Showed up yesterday morning. I spent a good chunk of yesterday loading up samples, which we're going to talk a little bit about as one of my bits of info to pass on about this thing. Got samples loaded up and got ready to go. And yeah, it's I spent a bunch of time yesterday evening, stayed up a little too late messing around with it, and it's been, first of all, I will say it has been a pleasure. It's, you know, it's Electron, and I'm a big user of their gear. And one of the great things about their gear is that they keep the workflow very similar from gear to gear, at least with the modern machines. So if you get something new, you feel right at home right away. You can jump right in and start making music. I remember that when I got the Syntac, and I had the Digitakt for a while, the original one, jumped right into the Syntac, and I was making music in like 30 seconds. And very much the same with this one. Obviously, there's a bunch of new things, which we'll talk about as much as possible in this stream today. A bunch of the new things. I think there's a lot of things that we're going to talk about that not a lot of people are talking about because they're using it in a different way. And yeah, I mean, there's some things that are very obvious and very evident that are super cool about this new iteration of the Digitakt, and some things that are brand new and kind of under the hood and probably not as sexy because they're not like first things you see and first things you use, but things that make this machine crazy functional compared with even the Digitakt 1 or any of the other machines in their lineup. So we're going to talk a bit about that. First things first, this machine is a loaner that I'm going to end up buying. I didn't get it from Electron. I got it from an online retailer that shot it over to let me use it, but I'm going to be buying it. So, but this isn't sponsored. It's not a sponsored stream or sponsored video or anything. And contrary to popular belief, I am not sponsored by Electron. These are things that I get because I love them, and I use because I love them, not because anybody's telling me I should. So feel free to post things in the chat. I will try to get to any questions that you have. I'm going to go over some of the things that I've found that I really like. And if there's things that you have questions or are curious about, we can talk about those during the live stream as well. I'm assuming, because I'm not getting any negative stuff in the chat, that the sound is okay. Just let me know if there's anything odd with the sound. I think I got it dialed in a little better now, so you should be able to hear the voice a little bit better. And the sound of the instruments when they come through should be pretty cool. So let me know. Let's see, where we at here, just to get started. Electron box workflow, sure, I will talk about that for sure. Sounds great. Awesome. Love that. Stream is during your nap time. Okay, well, I'm sorry to interrupt your nap time, but fortunately, these streams are posted up to YouTube when they're done. So take your nap, get your beauty rest, stay healthy, and then check this out when you get a moment. Let's see here. Oh, looks like somebody's Digitakt 2 just arrived by FedEx. It's funny, see the all caps and the explanation points that it's arriving. It was a weird feeling when I got this yesterday. I haven't been this excited to get a piece of gear in a while because I feel like there hasn't been a ton of really exciting things, at least from my workflow perspective. And I think the last thing I was this excited about receiving was when I got the Percons. And so it's kind of cool. I'm very excited to dig into this today with you guys. Let's see, you can share what 16 samples you use in one kit. Sure, we'll talk a little bit about how I'm building kits. Biggest difference between Digitakt 1 and Digitakt 2. Yes, we will talk about that for sure. Looks and sounds great. Awesome. That's what I was hoping. So let's dig into this a little bit first and foremost. What I want to show you guys is, for those of you who've been on these streams before or who've watched any of my other stuff, you have kind of a picture of what my live set has been. which was well, here, let's look at this here. So I had, for a long time, I had my modular case, my Octatrack, which I'm using the EasyBot performance template, using this as performance mixer, and the Oxy One controlling stuff. I did have in this position here, most recently I had a Digitakt 1. Prior to that, I had the analog rhythm. The only reason why I changed was I was trying to scale things down for travel a little bit because I'm going to be going to Europe, leaving in a couple days, and wanted to make sure that I wasn't, hauling around 20 bags worth of stuff. Then I also had the Digitakt, which was providing a bunch of voices. I was using 8 of the 12 voices as just additional voices that I could pick and choose from while I was improvising. And then I also had the 1010 black box, which I was using for longer samples, like vocals and atmospheres and that kind of jazz. So this is the new setup, which again, trying to streamline a little bit for travel. I'll be doing some videos during this trip, so you can see a little bit about how I'm traveling and stuff, because I believe it or not, I get a ton of questions about that, like how to pack up gear and how to use it, like how to travel with it in a safe way so that you're not having to check bags and stuff. So I'll go over that in a video that I'll be posting as we do some of the videos about the trip to Germany, trip to Superbooth, what's going on at Superbooth, a couple of gigs that I have over there and things like that. And then I'll be going from there directly to Seattle for another gig. So I'm going to kind of document all that stuff because I have had a bunch of questions about that stuff. And I think it's interesting to not just, talk spec sheets and knobs and workflow. Sometimes it's interesting to see the other stuff that goes into the world of live performance and traveling and going to gigs and things like that, and setting up and sound checks and how things work. So we'll be going over a bunch of that in these other videos just to break things up a little bit. But don't worry, there will still be a bunch of the gear stuff too, because I haven't gotten rid of my my love for gear. So let's see what else we have in the chat really quick. Audio sounds good. Cool. Won't be napping. I'm very happy that. Waiting patiently. Yeah, I was too. I was not very patient. Show us how to on manual pluck triggering. I'm not sure what that means, but we'll go over triggering things. What are your effects boxes for final sound output on the road? Go over that as well. Plucking LFO. Okay. Triggers. God, let's see, mode reset. Okay, cool. Hello from Reykjavik. Awesome, Iceland. One of the things, it's funny, I love how far-reaching everything is, and pop into the chat and just say where you're watching from, because it's always exciting. This morning we had our group call for the Patreons that are part of our group coaching thing, which you can check out on Patreon if you're interested in. But it was cool because we had people from here in the US, like Seattle and Houston. We had Canada, we had Germany. So it's cool to see where people are coming from and what they're doing. And there's this thing that kind of has us all bound together, which I think is very cool. It's an international thing, which I think is very, very awesome. Hello from Amsterdam. Hey, Robin, what's going on? Robin Kamschauer. If you don't know him, and I know I'm butchering your last name, but if you don't know Robin, check out his stuff because he's a fantastic live artist. So I would say definitely go see his stuff. Check out his videos online and check out his music and stuff like that because he's very, very good. So thanks for tuning in, Robin. It's great to see you. Let's see here. Why black box and not SP404 MK2? I'll answer that one really quickly because it's a quick answer. Size. The SP404 is the size of about 5 of those black boxes. And again, for travel, you're gonna hear a common theme of scaling down and getting as much out of a small amount of gear as possible. So yeah, that was a total size thing. And the 404 MK2 is a bit overkill for what I was using it for. Really, the black box for me was only for longer vocal samples that needed to be time stretched and atmospheres that needed to be time stretched. So I just needed something that I could quickly launch a vocal if I wanted to chuck one into a song that I was working on. And so it was the simplest way to do it was with the black box. Let's see here. Montreal, awesome, beautiful city. I love that place. I've spent a bit of time there. From Slovenia, very cool. Slovakia, hey, you guys are kind of neighbors. From Hamburg, Germany, nice. Detroit, Colorado, awesome. You are right down the road. I am also in Colorado. Let's see, Olympia, Washington. Hey, from Denver. Hey, man. The Denver crowd. Gotta have that Colorado music crowd being represented here. UK. Downscaling setup a bit as well. Yeah, Robert. So we'll talk about that today. That's a big motivation behind why I'm doing what I'm doing, and particularly what I'm doing with the Digitakt 2, and we'll talk about that in a minute. One of my favorite things about it is that it is allowing me to scale down, because a lot of these new functions that it can do is making it take the place of other things, or at least the way I was using other things. And you always have to keep in mind, whenever I'm talking about, taking the place, or does this make this obsolete or whatever, it's not a matter of it takes the place of the gear in general. I'm just saying that it takes the place of something in my setup in the way that I'm using it. So it may not do everything that that piece of gear can do, but if it will do the things that I was using that piece of gear for in my setup, then it will gain a place. So like, for example, the black box. Black box does a lot more. It's a sample player, it's a sequencer, you can have multiple sequencers. You could play a whole live set just on a 1010 black box. I was not using it. Sorry for the clip there. I was not using it for that. I was just using it for clip launching, looping, time stretched samples, which I can now do with the Digitakt 2. So it's, saved me some space. Cool. Let's see here. Mexico. Awesome. I love Mexico. So where in Mexico? I actually lived there for a year, actually 2 years. So awesome. Helsinki, Finland. Awesome. Tbilisi, Georgia. Sweet. Tampa, Florida. I've been there as well. Awesome. Cheers from Italy. That was my last long trip. I was in Rome. My wife and I went to Rome in January, which was amazing. Absolutely loved it. Let's see, St. Petersburg, Russia. Awesome. This is so cool. Like, again, that's why I wanted to put this up here, is just, I love the fact that everybody's checking things out from everywhere. So yeah, so have a little coffee in honor of my good friend Bo that I'm going to see in Super Booth next week. A little sip of the coffee. I'm an all-day coffee drinker, so I don't know about you guys. Baja California, Mexico. I met my wife in just outside of San Carlos, so just on the mainland right across from you guys. So I'm very familiar with that area. Norfolk, Virginia, cool. I lived in DC for a while. Right on. So let's get into the gear. Let's see what we've got going here. So let's talk about, so some of the questions that everybody has already posed are, what are the biggest differences, biggest similarities? Now, you've all seen, I'm sure you guys all watched EasyBot's video, you watched Lou Pop's video, you watched Cuckoo's video. So you all know kind of the nuts and bolts of the machine. We're not gonna talk too much about that, but we'll talk specifically about how I'm using it and in a workflow way. So the obvious ones that I'll just glance over because it's what everybody else has talked about. Instead of having 8 tracks, you've now got 16 tracks. Instead of being mono samples, these are stereo samples, which is a big deal. There is the sequencer, instead of being 64 steps, is 128 steps. So that's another big deal. Those are like the big ones that keep getting talked about. The ability to do stereo sampling was the biggest one. Going along with the stereo sampling bit, adding additional memory. The old one had a 1 gig hard drive and 64 megabits of sample memory per project. So you could load up 127 one-shots basically to use it in your project. Now this new one has 20 gigs of hard drive and 400 megabits of samples. So instead of having 27 slots per project, you have over 1,000 slots per project, which for some people won't mean anything. for some people it won't mean anything to have those additional sample slots because you're just going project to project to project. So it all depends on what your workflow is. But for me personally, I use one project the whole time while I'm playing, and I just use different kits within that project. So having that many samples all being able to be in that one single project and not having to change projects during a show is a gigantic thing for me personally in my workflow. So that was very, very cool. Let's see here, just really quick. Uploading my samples on it right now. Yes. Oh, let's talk about that. So let's talk samples. I got this yesterday around 11 o'clock in the morning, started loading samples on it right away. I put 4 gigs of samples into it, so about a fifth of what the memory would hold. And it took 5 hours, I think 4.5 or 5 hours. File transfer is very, very, very slow. Now, I get it. That's a lot of information. It doesn't have a super fast processor because it's not a computer, so I get that it's going slowly. But if you do end up with a Digitakt 2, just go into it knowing that that initial file transfer of a big dump of files is going to take forever. As you go through and you're going to be loading in like little bits by little bits in the future, you're never going to have that problem again, really. But loading in that big giant chunk of samples takes a long time. So I would just be mentally prepared when you get it that's going to be a problem. One thing I did notice is that I was able to use it while I was loading samples in, which was cool. There were a few times where it kind of like glitched out and paused on things, so it wasn't perfect, but you don't have to just sit there and stare at it wishing you could use it during that whole sample upload process. You can actually use it at the same time, which was pretty cool. Let's see here. Good evening. So you must be from Europe somewhere. You're saying good evening. When are you at Super Booth? I'm there all 3 days. I will be there all 3 days. I'm doing a couple demos for Oxy at their booth. I'm doing a demo set and a chat about improvised live performance at the Bux booth, the people that make the beautiful hardcover books about synthesizers. And that will be at 1:30 p.m. on the Friday if you're there. And I have a couple of other things going on in town. I'm doing actually doing a DJ set on Sunday evening for Refugee Worldwide Radio, which should be tons of fun, and a couple of other things. So it should be super cool. I'm excited. So if you're going to be there, please come say hi. Oh, the other thing, a chance to say hi on the Saturday. I think it's at 3 in the afternoon. Post in the chat the time because I don't remember, but it is on the Super Booth schedule. Bo from Bo Beats organizes a YouTuber meetup, which is kind of all the synth YouTubers, and we all kind of get together and then everybody joins us in the same area so that we can meet up and meet people in person, because we spend all this time like chatting over Discord or chatting on these chats from live streams and you don't really get to see or know a human being. So it's a cool opportunity to get to meet people in person. I met some people last year that I've kept up with over this whole year since Super Booth. So it's really cool to get a chance to meet people face to face. So definitely swing by that. It's Saturday afternoon. It's by the circus tent. So definitely go down there. It's cool. I know I'll be there. Bo, Ura, Jorb, Dave Mack, Travarsi, who else? Florian Pills, Starsky, whole bunch, like really everybody who's just kind of a synth YouTuber is going to be there. So it will be a ton of fun. So if you're going to be in the area, definitely swing by and introduce yourself. Okay, so let's see here. Sorry. Thank you guys for all the chat questions, by the way, because it makes it more fun to kind of keep things going. Electron Gear getting closer to being a Pip-Boy with each iteration. Love it. Yeah. Sorry, let's see. How do you trigger trigless plucks on your electrons while sending note trigs from the Oxy? So you can't do it directly, but you can do it in record mode. If you hold down the trigless trig, it activates it almost like a scene. And then if you take your hand off, it goes back to its normal thing. But just be careful not to just press it because you'll lose your trigless trig. Otherwise, it doesn't necessarily do that correctly. Would you consider replacing the Euro rack with Digitakt to remove the Oxy. No. For a couple reasons. One, I like the immediacy of the Euro rack. I love to be able to touch the knobs and have it be knob function and all that stuff. That's why I use Euro rack. And when I actually had the Digitakt in my setup, I was sequencing it from the Oxy because it doesn't quantize notes to key, and you can't generate randomly generated notes in key, which the Oxy does. So that's why it was sending everything to that. Let's see. Bit of clipping. I'll try to speak less loudly. Actually, I can turn this down a little bit. How's that? That should be a little better, a little less. I'll try not to cough into the mic as well. Let's see. Transfer keeps stopping during the transfer for you. No, it didn't stop at all. It was just slow, like crazy slow. Slow dumping of the files, not a big problem. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is you'll do it once. Like this was a 4 gig download or upload of files. Once you've got that in there, you're not going to be doing that in that size very often, at least I hope not. So then you'll just load in things little by little and it'll take a couple minutes and you'll be fine. So yeah, all I need is a cowbell, yes, for sure. I have problems on my Digitakt 2. When I enable audio input, it gets a lot of random pop sounds. Settles down after a few minutes, but it feels bad. Oh, I haven't seen that yet. Interesting. After a week with Digitakt 2, I'm selling the Rhythm MK2 for sale. I could see that for some people. I will never sell my Rhythm, but I can see it. Let's see. Sample format question. Samples need to be 1648 mono. Yes, so they're stereo, they're 24-bit as well. They can take 24-bit and 48. You actually have a couple of choices of file format with the Digitakt 2, which I haven't gotten too much into, but something definitely to check out. So let's jump back in now that we've caught up with the chat. Let's jump back in to the machine and how this has changed my setup. So because I was able to pull the black box out of the setup because this now has a time stretch engine, which I can show you. Here, I'll just do this with a kick. There is a, so on this track, I have this set up as a, actually it's set up as a one shot. That's fine. I'll put it in as a stretch. So anyway, what that will do for those of you not familiar, so you had the warp engine that was in here before, which would cut the sample up into little bits and it would move them around so that you could change as you change tempo, it would change. Now this is a much better proper time stretching algorithm. It is still chopping it up into grains, but it's doing it into far more. So it's much less noticeable. So like with this one, I have a vocal sample on here, so I can go ahead and just play that. So you can hear it basically takes that vocal and it doesn't change the pitch at all, which it was doing in the past. It would change, it would pitch up or down as you sped it up or slowed it down. And with this now, you can slow it way down. So like, actually I'll take off the kick and just play this again. So if I was to take the tempo way down here, let's see here. So you can hear that it still has, and then as you get down a little lower, you start to hear the grains a little bit lower in tempo here. It'll take, so you can hear that little bit of jitter that comes from the very, very low end. So this was a sample that was at, I think 130 BPM, and now I've got it down into the 60s. But once you get this back up closer, so within like 20 or 30 BPM of where it starts, you don't really hear anything at all, which is great. And I think the vast majority of samples that people are going to be using anyway are going to be relatively close to what you would have had them sampled at in the first place. So it's it's definitely a big addition. So having that, being able to play live samples, longer samples, sorry, that are time stretched in the rare occasions that I play those, makes it so that I can take one box out of my setup, which was the 1010 black box. The other thing that I was able to take out of the setup was the Digitakt. Now, it's not a one-to-one comparison, but the way I was using the Digitakt, and again, this goes back to how I was using things. The way I was using the Digitakt was as basically mono synth voices that I was sequencing from the Oxy One. And I had it so that I could have more voices in a small amount of space. And I was using 8 of the voices so that I could keep it all on one sequencer. One of the Oxy One's multi-sequencers that has 8 tracks on it. So it was every track of the 8 voices that I was using. So then I was able to have additional voices, so it wasn't just the modular, to be able to do to be able to have some variety. Because again, I'm improvising, so I'm not reusing a lot of voices. I need to have a lot of flexibility to bounce around, and that was just a helpful way to do that. So now with the Digitakt 2, I'm still going to keep 8 tracks of drums across the top, 1 through 8, and then 9 through 16, actually 10 through 16, and I'll explain that in a second why, are going to all be voices. So exactly what I was doing with the Digitakt. So I still have those 8 voices that I'm able to use, and I'm actually going to use a few more, and I'll show you how I'm setting this up in a minute, so that I still have the same amount of variety, and I still have a lot of the same control over the sounds, like multiple filters and the ability to add effects per channel and things like that. So a lot of sound sculpting possibility. I'm just using a sample, usually a one-shot, as the sound engine rather than a synth engine that I was using in the Digitakt. And there's certain sounds from the Digitakt that I really like, so I'm just going to sample those into the Digitakt as one-shots, so that way I'll be able to still use those there. Just to really quick talk about workflow here, how I'm using different things. Sorry. Just want to get out of this. Okay, so basically having all of these voices now, just to be able to set them up the way that I want to use them in here. So if you've seen any of my videos before, I like to set things up in kits and have them all kind of be in the same place so that you know what you've got when you change from kit to kit or pattern to pattern or song to song or whatever. As you move around, you have kind of a convention of where you keep things, so you're always going back to the same. So like I always have my kick on 1, and that keeps me from like, okay, I move on to a new thing. Okay, where's my kick now? I've kind of lost it. It's somewhere else. So 1 is always going to be a kick, as you'll hear here. So 1 is always going to be a kick. 2 is always a clap or a snare. So I've got that right next to it. 3 and 4 are percussive elements. Usually 3 is a lower frequency, 4 is a higher frequency. So you've got a couple things in there. 5 and 6 are always hats. You've got closed hat with 16th notes closed hat, and then an offbeat hi-hat on the 6. So those are the things that are kind of always the same. Kick, clap or snare, 2 percussions, closed hat, open hat. So on every kit that I build it so that that's the case. So when I change kits, if I have, let's say I've got a kick playing and I change kits, then I'll be able to still have a kick playing on that track. So it allows me to kind of have some continuity as I change things around while still changing things around. Now, I used to put, because I had kind of a limited amount of space, I was making samples for my kicks that included a rumble. And then I would use the decay or use things like that in order to control the rumble a little bit, because I use a lot of rumble kicks in the stuff that I make. Now what I'm doing is I put the rumble on 9. So I have those 2 together. So 1 and 9 together is my kick. It's one thing, because I don't do we'll talk about this a little bit for a second. So there's a couple different ways that you can do a rumble. So if you're just using your kick, and you can go into your effects and you can add a little bit of reverb to give it some background, and then add a little bit of delay. And that gives you that kind of like percussive rumble. It's like a really simple way to do it. And what's cool about that is when you move that pattern, if you change up the rhythm of it, you've still got the rumble attached to it, right? So that's one way to do it. What I'm doing now, and what I've done actually for a long time, is I sequence my rumbles. So if we go to the rumble track and you look at what the sequencer looks like, I don't put anything on the hit where the kick is, so that acts as kind of like a janky version of a side chain. It just basically keeps the rumble out of the way of the kick so that you can kind of have everything together. Then I'll have 2, 3, 4, and like the next beats within each or the different steps within each beat, and then I will parameter lock those. So if we go to the trig page, if you go to trig page, is that where I did it? I didn't do it on this one. So basically what I'll do is I'll go into a parameter lock the velocity. So I might bring this one down to like 75. I'll keep 3 all the way up because I want the up to be the most pronounced of the steps of the rumble, so that it gives you a bounce in the kick, and then 4 will be kind of in the middle. So I might bring that one down to like halfway between the two. Then what's cool with the Digitakt, you can take this and just copy those 3 trigs, and then I can paste and paste and paste. So now I've got all of those, the differences in velocity. So now if I play, I think I took this off. So you can hear how it gives you that kind of gallop like what you got from the delay, but you have a lot more control over it because you're doing velocity of every single step. So now if I add the kick to this, and now because it's on 2 separate channels, I have control over that. So if I go into this one, I can bring down the volume of it. So I can have it be less pronounced, I can bring it way back up. So you basically, by doing this method, you have control over the kick and rumble separate from each other. And that's why I like sequencing the rumbles in rather than just doing them with effects. If when I'm doing these production wise, if I'm doing these in the box, I definitely use the effects. And then a lot of times I will record just the effects send and then use that as a separate rumble and then sidechain that. So there's different ways to do it. But I found that this works out really handy for me. And now that the Digitakt 2 has 16 channels, I didn't feel like I was wasting a channel by separating them out that way. So it was handy. It was something I was doing on the rhythm when I was playing with that live, because I had 12 channels, kind of, not 12 voices, but 12 channels. So I was able to keep those 2 separately. And here on this, I'm able to keep them separated out, which is, I think, a big, huge plus. So anyway, we've got drums on 1 through 6 that are going to stay the same all the time. 7 and 8, I think I'm going to be using those as atmospheres and vocals, and that's going to kind of take the place of what I was using the black box for. So I've always got them in one spot. And then I've got 10 through 16 that I can use for other samples, voices, things like that. So I've been messing around with that since yesterday, how I'm going to use those. And I think that I'm going to use some number of them, probably 10, 11, and 12, or 10, 11, 12, 13. I'm going to use those as one-shots that I can sequence and play and have a lot more freedom over. And then I'll keep the last few as some longer samples. So maybe like a percussive sample or a melodic line or something like that. So it'll give me some freedom to be able to play around with that. So that's what I was doing yesterday. So like if I was to play... So this is a longer loop. So again, kind of percussive, and it's a sampled loop. So just being able to take something like this and then just add it in with the kick and rumble. And then I can't remember what I had on these two. This is all what was kind of left over from last night. So then I can add in another sample. Maybe I didn't have anything on that one. I think I had something on 13 though. So again, it gives you a lot of freedom, and that's, everybody's like, oh, 16 tracks, that's, whatever, what do you need 16 tracks for? And the reality is you probably don't, but with my workflow, 16 tracks allows me to eliminate other boxes by taking, these 2 tracks that are here that are going to be atmosphere and vocal. That was a whole box that was just doing atmospheres and vocals. So to be able to just put that on a couple tracks, because I've got all the other ones I can use without having to lose something, and having the really the time stretching on this, allowing me to do that, makes it really, really handy. And then being able to have all the voices on these ones, replacing the Digitakt, and I know it's not a one-to-one because it's a sample versus a synth and all that stuff, but for my workflow, I just needed voices. So now I can have voices in here that are doing other things. So this sound could have just been coming from the Digitakt as a one-shot synth, or instead I just take a one-shot sample and I put that in here, and I can sequence that as well from either the Electron box if I want to parameter lock steps to it, or from the Oxy. I have everything set up to sample these tracks as well. And again, with things like that offbeat hat, you still have a lot of the same control that you had through the other devices. So I can reduce the attack, shorten it up. And change it into a totally different sound, even though it's not a synth engine, which is what I was doing on the rhythm. But now I can do this here on the Digitakt too. So the point being is that this box in my live set will be a lot of the kind of foundational stuff. So all of the drums are very simple, and I will have those pre-sequenced. So there's always a 4 on the floor kick, there's always an offbeat hat, the basics. But then I can always go in and I can change those up. So like if I'm doing something with just this kick, for example, and I want to change that up during the performance and make it be more of a breakbeat, I can just change that. And it's really easy to change that and sequence it live and keep things going. And then if I want to, I can just go right back into a 4 on the floor kick. So I'll keep those foundational basic patterns like the 4 on the floor kick in here, but it won't be, it's not that I'm pre-doing tracks or anything like that. It's the idea is still to have that as a foundation that I can go back to. The other things that will be foundational in here is by kit. Now that these have kits, I'm going to still keep 1 through 6 the same kit after kit. So I started building this yesterday because I just got the machine and I've got to use it next week in Berlin. I'll be doing this on the plane on the way there if you're wondering what I do on the plane. I'm going to keep those the sounds that I have on 1 through 6 the same. I have some certain sounds that I really like and that have a lot of flexibility that I can change them and modify them during a set. So I will take I'll take those ones, and so those ones the way they are. And with the rumble on 9 as well. And then I'm going to take all of the other sounds, so 7, 8, and then 10 through 16, leave those blank and duplicate that to new kits. And so then I can change up what's on those. So 7, 8 on each kit will be a different atmosphere and a different vocal, and 10 through 16 will be different voicings. And what I'll do is, just like I did with the Digitakt, I'll just do groups of voices that go well together, sounds that don't clash and overlap, because you don't have the ability to EQ and do all that stuff. So you need to really carefully pick sounds so that they they don't trip over each other when you're doing live performance. So I'll do that. I'll build kits that go well together and don't interfere with one another. And then I'll start building another kit. And what that does is it allows me to bounce around during a show, keep the drums as kind of a cohesive thing that goes through, use those sounds to kind of change mood, change atmosphere, and at the same time, still have all of my voicing stuff, all of my, I always do my air quotes, my melodic stuff coming from the modular. And the reason why I do the air quotes for melodic is because it's not really melodies and chord changes and things like that in the style of music that I do. It's really tonal percussion. So that's what this modular rig is designed to do. And so like if we were to just go through what I was just doing there, so we've got our kick and rumble, then we bring in some like percussive things that are samples that are in here. That gives us kind of a foundational groove to get started with. And then I can go into the Oxy, or actually I'll go to the modular, and I can start to bring up things like if I want to bring up a bass line, do something on the pizza here, I can just bring those in. I know I have my foundational drums here, so I can go back here and just jump into, I'm a big fan of the offbeat hi-hats, if you haven't noticed. I think they just add a nice groove. Then let's see here. So next we'll go to the BIA. And that'll give us another kind of tonal percussion thing. And I'm gonna have that going through the Ghost, so you hear what that sounds like. And because it's going through the Ghost, I can sweep that filter and I can pick out different harmonics within it. And what that does is it makes it sound like I've got another voice going. So if you listen to this. So those higher harmonics that came in, that's just from the Ghost picking out a harmonic and emphasizing it through delay and reverb. And then with the Octatrack having the ability to do performance effects, so if I just want to do like a simple high pass, in order to bring in, let's say, some closed hats. So again, it gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to do a lot of really cool stuff within here. And for me, the most important part of this is the ability to do this improvised and have it not be like, okay, I have preset A that goes with pattern 1 on this machine and pattern 1 on this machine with song 1 on here. They all have to program change together and all that stuff. For me, I know there's a lot of people that play that way, and props to them, because that would scare me to death. I mean, the idea that if one thing goes wrong or gets out of whack, it screws your whole set. With this, I just kind of go in counting on everything being out of whack and just improvise from the beginning, rather than having to improvise when I get you know, thrown off in the middle by something going weird. So before we go on to the next section, I just want to jump in and see the chat a little bit because it's been going crazy and I appreciate that from all of you guys. Let's see here. I'm going to scroll back and see. How would you say it relates, differs from the Octatrack? I've been seeing this a lot. It's a very different machine from the Octatrack. So if you go back to how they were originally both, what they were originally both designed to do, the fact that they're both samplers, that's kind of like saying, an MPC is like whatever, like they're each their own unique individual thing. The Digitakt was originally designed as a one-shot drum machine that was a sample-based one-shot machine. That's why it had small memory, it was mono, all that stuff, because it was really designed to be a sampler. A drum machine. It is a sampler and a sample machine, which they've expanded on now by doing the stereo samples and things like that. But at its core, it is not a traditional sampler in the vein of like an MPC. That's more the Octatrack. The Octatrack has a way better sample editing and chopping and mangling workflow because that's really what it's set up to do. It's set up to live sample, to sample from other machines, to have those samples go in and move around slice points and do all that kind of stuff. The Digitakt and Digitakt 2 do very rudimentary versions of that to kind of get you by, but that's not really what it's designed for. It's really designed to be a one-shot sequenceable sampler. The fact that it has now time stretching makes it more usable for other things. It does have a slice mode, which I'll use quotes, it's a grid mode, so it can only slice to the grid. If you have a single sample, you can move start point and end point, but if you slice into multiple slices on the grid, they stay in the grid. You can't move individual start points and end points like you can in the Octatrack. So they're really very different than that. Now, that's just on the sampling side. Then if you go down the Octatrack rabbit hole, the Octatrack has 3 recording buffers. They can all record any channels from anywhere in combination and can be sent to playback on any channel. So for live looping and things like that, you can set up channels as loopers. You have all of the effects that you can chain together and create custom sample chains, which is what I have in here. What EasyBot has done a fantastic job of building this up into a template of performance effects. So all of that stuff is stuff that the Octatrack does that the Digitakt 2 doesn't do. So they're really very different machines, which is why I have the two of them together. I'm not using the Octatrack for anything that has to do with sampling, and I'm not using the Digitakt for anything that has to do with performance effects or anything like that. They each have their own job in my workflow, and they're each really super unique pieces of kit. Let's see, should I continue my DT1 projects on DT2 or just start fresh? You can. It kind of depends how into it you are, how deep into a song you are. You could maybe go move your projects over and then expand on them. You've got an additional 8 tracks, you've got stereo, you've got all kinds of cool things. Maybe you even take your initial tracks, swap out the samples for something that's stereo. But yeah, I think that would definitely be worth doing. Let's see, field recordings in the DT2. Yeah, it's a great thing for it, for sure. Hey, Rolf, what's going on? Rolf is another Colorado dude who's here. Great to see Colorado well represented here. Doubled sequencer, additional trig conditions. Oh yeah, that's another thing that's really cool. We can talk now a little bit about the under the hood stuff because, again, there's a lot of evident things, like you see more shiny flashy lights on here, up here, so you know that there's more tracks and you know that there's 16 steps, whatever. Those things are very easy to see. There's certain things that are less obvious, that are more kind of the under the hood things that for me make this even more valuable. So if you go to the trig menu, for example, it used to be that you had the choice. You could either do a percentage probability per step, or you could do a condition per step, like play the first time out of 4 or the second time out of 7 or whatever you wanted to do, or you could do a fill or not fill function. And so you had one probability that you could choose one of those things, and depending on where you turned the knob, that was what it came to. Now you've got them separated out as three things. So you could do a 31% probability of something happening the second of every 4 times only when you press the fill. So if you've never used one of these machines, your head probably just exploded. But if you have, you'll understand why that's such a big deal, because now you don't have to pick and choose. You don't have to decide which of those things goes better with your flow. You can do you can do them in combination now. You obviously don't have to do them all, but the ability to generate random things, which is something that I love to do by using things like that, is crazy, crazy powerful. Something else that's under the hood that I think is really cool, if you go into the compressor settings on here, so function and mod now, which used to be the LFO one, so the compressor always had the ability to sidechain on the master track going out. So you could sidechain to a track within here that you could pick from. So for example, I have my kick on 1. So if I was to sidechain to 1, cool, a sidechain compressor in a groovebox, that's amazing. The reality is it wasn't very amazing, because that track that you were sidechaining from was still going out on that master channel through the master compressor. So the more you clamp down on your threshold to get a kind of a sidechain pump, which is why a lot of people use sidechains, the more pump you got, the more it sidechained the kick that it was the more it compressed the kick that it was sidechaining from. So the more you turned it up, the more you lost your kick. So then you just lost it. And the whole point of sidechaining on a kick is you want to duck everything else out of the way so the kick can shine through. And what this does in effect, or what this did in effect, was took the kick out along with everything else. So it made the sidechain kind of useless. Now, if you go into the setup, you have compressor routing, and you can select which channels. So if you have a Syntact, this will look very much like the FX block routing. So you can select any channels or deselect any channels that you want to have go through that master compressor. So I have this side chaining to track 1, and if you notice, track 1 is black because I took it out. I can put it in or take it out. And if you do down arrow, you also have the left and right inputs and the effect sends. So you can decide if you want to put the left and right inputs coming through the machine and the effect send. You can decide if you want them going through the compressor or not. In some cases you might want it, in some cases you might not want. So the compressor just became infinitely more usable than it ever had been in the past, which I think is a crazy cool function. Another thing that's kind of a under the hood function of the Digitakt 2 that, again, I don't think has gotten the hype that it should have gotten is so one of the things that I've always talked about with these, the reason why I use the Oxy is because you can't quantize to key within this, which you still can't do generating randomly. The Octatrack always had this ability in its arpeggiator mode that you could parameter lock and then turn the tune knob, and it would only give you the notes within the key that you're set to. And the Octatrack was the only device that could do that. Now, if we go into the Digitakt 2 here, if we go to the trig mode and you hold down a trigger here, if I turn the note, it locks them in chromatically like it always did in the past, right? But if I press it down and turn it, it's only giving me the notes. It's quantized to the notes that are in the scale that I have this set to. So if we go to the keyboard mode, I have this in Phrygian E. Everybody knows that's my favorite key to play in. So now, if you're not familiar, Phrygian E is only the white notes on the keyboard starting at E, and you get this cool one semitone between the first two, like you don't in a minor scale, and it makes it sound much darker for me. For techno, I think it's a very cool sounding scale. So now if I go into this and I press this down, I'm not getting any sharps or flats. It's only the ones that are in the Phrygian E scale. So again, usability wise, that's a massive, massive upgrade. Being able to do that, and not for everybody, honestly. Some people won't care about that. You could always do the keyboard fold in key, and then you could go in and just play things in. I don't do that as much, so I like the ability to change these notes up in a live performance. So again, we'll go into in a second a cool way to use this with the Euclidean sequencer once we talk a bit about that. Yeah, so that's going to be next up on here. Look, before we go into that, let's go back to the chat really quick. Additional triggering sessions, yeah. Black Box is a multi-track recorder. Yeah, 66 seconds max per sample, again, because it's designed to really be a one-shot sampler. And that's, just so you know, the 66 seconds is max when you're sampling in. It's the maximum amount that you can sample into something. You can load samples that are much, much longer than that into this, but you can't sample longer than 66 seconds because, again, it wasn't really designed for that. It's designed to be a drum sampler, so mostly one-shots with a few like little loops and things like that. If you want longer than that, use the Octatrack or the Black Box or the SP404 or something like that. Let's see here. Best modules to get started with Eurorack. Wow, that's a long answer for that conversation. I will give you the answer that somebody gave me that was very useful, which was there is no best modules to start with. The first thing you have to start with is decide what you want your modular to do, what you're using it for. So if you notice in my modular, I have no drums. I mean, they can all be percussive modules, but I don't have any drums because my drums are being handled externally. I don't have any sequencers other than the one that's here, and the PAMs can be used as a sequencer, but I'm not using any sequencing in here. I don't have any sequencer modules because I'm doing that externally. So my rack here is set up as voices going through effects and a mixer. And that's all this is. So this is a multi-voice, multi-timbral synthesizer that I built using sounds that I like. Some people want a rack that's just a drum machine. Some people want a rack that's more like a groove box. It's got a little of everything. Some people just want one voice with a ton of modulation and a ton of effects because they want to do sound design on that one voice. So really, the best modules to start with are the ones that go best with whatever the reason is you've decided you want to start with modular. So pick that out first and then build that thing, and then you can build out from there. But only pick one thing, because if you try to build a whole modular set with one thing, I mean, unless you've got, 20 grand just kicking around and you want to design some cool big thing. Okay, let's see here. Do you use a lot of patterns per show or just one and change samples on one pattern? So a couple things. So the Digitakt 2 has kits, meaning that you can save banks of sounds that are by channel. So like I can set up a whole bank of sounds, a whole sound kit that I can overlay onto whatever pattern I've done. You couldn't do that in the past. So what I was doing is I was using patterns as kits, and I was making sure that my 1 was always a kick, my 2 was always a clap and snare, blah, 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 all the way down the line. So I was making kits before it had kits. Now that it has kits, I don't really need to ever change pattern because I can change kit. And so I can redo something new. And I can kind of, let's say I want to keep, let's say I have that breakbeat kick. I can just load a new kit on it, and whatever the kick is in that new kit will have that same breakbeat pattern that I was doing, because I've kept the pattern the same. I've just loaded new samples over the top of it. So as I mentioned before, 1 through 6 will always be that kind of a drum kit that I always have. 7 and 8 are always going to be atmosphere and vocals. 9 will always be the rumble for the first one. And then 10 through 16, I'm deciding how I'm going to use those. Some will be one-shot samples that I sequence. Others will be more longer samples. And the reason why I'm going to decide that is because I want the longer samples using the stretch engine. So I want to try to keep that always the stretch engine. And I want the other ones to be using the one-shot engine. So that way I've got them using the machine that is the best one for it. So yes. Um, I saw a question before about how what I'm doing end of chain. It really depends on where I'm playing. If I'm playing in a place that has a really good sound system, I will go out of the Octatrack through the analog heat so that I can add some saturation and a little low end boost, a little high end boost, and some drive. Just to kind of master it up a little bit. But if I'm not playing in something that has a really great sound system, or if I'm not playing with DJs as well as live sets, I'll just go straight out of the Octatrack. And I've got it set up with enough grit and distortion and compression where it's needed in order to not have to worry too much about it, unless I'm being compared right next to fully mastered DJ tracks, and then I'll go out through something like that. On this trip, I'm not bringing the heat because I'm just really trying to scale down the amount of stuff I'm carrying with me. So yeah. Let's see here. Modular grid. Yes, modular grid's awesome. If you haven't been on modular grid, the best thing I love about modular grid is that I have a fixed size of my case. The 6U84 fits in one side of my rolling carry-on bag so that I can carry it onto the plane. So I don't let myself expand past that for my live performance. So if I want to change something up, I go on modular grid where I can do a virtual case with that size, and I can say like, okay, if I pull this module out, will this fit? And then how much space I have, and then will this fit? So you can build out your case virtually before you actually build it in your other one. You can move things around and see if they work better next to each other. So yeah, modular grid is very, very cool. Say goodbye to your wallet. Absolutely. Psytrance kick bass. Kind of. This is a little bit more percussive. The Psytrance bass tends to be a bass that is that just has a bit of attack on it. This is really, I'm actually using a kick sample, so I've got a transient percussive at the beginning of it. But yeah, I can hear how they can sound similar, especially if you jazz it up with a bunch of overdrive. Which overdrive is another thing, just to go into really quick. If you go into the mixer channel of this, so function mod, takes you in, so the first thing you get is compressor, then you have tracks 1 through 8 mixer, and then you have tracks 9 through 16 mixer, and then on the last page you have the volume, the volume of your delay, your reverb, and your chorus, and then you have master overdrive, which is basically another reason why I don't need to bring the analog heat for this. Is I get plenty of saturation out of my modular just by the nature of the types of modules I'm using and the way I have them set up, and going through the Ghost gives it plenty of saturation. But the digital sounds that were coming out of the Digitakt 1 before, they had a tendency to sound a little too clean and a little too digital. And so with this, you've got this master overdrive, and it allows you to really kind of boost up the kind of grit and power, and it adds a bit of that same saturation and drive that the analog heat did, not in the same way, but it allows it in a non-massive sound system environment. It allows it to really boost up the sound quite a bit and make it sound really really fat. So let's see here. Live looping with the black box. Yeah, that's cool. Ricky Tinez has a cool one about sampling a modular in the black box too, if you want to watch that one. Let's see here. EasyBot sold you on the Chaos replay. Cool. Yeah, it's cool. It has its place. I mean, it's in this setup, it could take the place of the Octatrack, but in a much lesser way, because you can't build your own specialized effects like you can in that. I would say for somebody who's deciding on what to use, if they're not going to use the Octatrack and they wanted performance effects, I think it's definitely a better budget-friendly option than something like an RMX 1000, but very much in the same vein. It's definitely a DJ effects processor that now it has found kind of a home in the live hardware world, which I think is great. I mean, the more variety we have, the better. And at its price, I think it's a super solid piece of kit. but it's basically you're talking about in either or between that, the Octatrack performance template, or an RMX 1000, or even in some cases like an SP404 that you can use as an effects processor as well. So very cool. Too many tracks. Yeah. Yeah, the thing is, the key when I was doing my call this morning with the Patreons that do the group coaching, we were talking about keeping it simple, and I think that's something to always remember, particularly with techno. But I think that with any music, our tendency is, if it's not where we want it to be, to add something to it. And the reality is, something I heard a long time ago is they said, if you're adding something, reevaluate for a minute. Are you adding it because it needs it? Or are you adding it because you didn't do a good enough job with the things you already have in there? Do you have a wrong sound that you're trying to make up for by throwing something else at it? Or does it actually need something, right? And so think about that so that you don't over cluster stuff up. One of the things, my general rule of thumb that I do in this is I try to limit myself to the number of things that I have playing at once, and just kind of keep that in the back of my head. So I'm like, oh wow, I kind of got a lot going. I want to bring that in. What should I bring out to make some room for it? Rather than saying, oh yeah, that would sound great. Let's just like shove all the faders up and make everything go in there. So yeah, let's see here. Reducing external synths. It is great to need less boxes. Can you save MIDI CC mappings by kit? Yes, you can. And what's very cool is, so other things that the Digitakt 2 has, and I don't have it set up to do this right now, I can probably show you guys, but it used to be that when you if you swapped something out, so let's just use this track. So now all these tracks can be MIDI tracks. They can be swapped just like in the syntax. So like, let's say we go to this track and we go to source, we can choose which machine we want. So we've got one shot, warp, stretch, repitch, grid, and we have MIDI. So we go all the way down, you hit yes. 16 is now a MIDI track, which is very cool because now you get these options to select different things within your MIDI track. So it used to be, if you were going to send CC values, you used to have 8, and you could set them up like 1 through 8 like this, and they were called value 1, value 2, value 3, and that was it. Now there's 2 features with this that are really cool. One is MIDI learn, so you can actually set this to, so if you hit function and activate that, you can set this to learn. You can wiggle the knob on whatever we've got this sent out to, and as long as you've got it coming back into the MIDI in, it will learn that channel. So you have to have the MIDI out and in both connected, and then it will learn that. And then the other thing that's really cool is that you can go in and you can change the name, change the MIDI parameter name. So you still only have, I think you've got 5 characters that you can use, but again, really usable, workable solutions, so that now you can do a preset. So let's say you've got a synth that you always use, and you've got certain CC messages that you want to always have it to. You can save those with names, and then when you connect that synth, you just load that one up and say, okay, I've got this synth that I'm going to use, and I know this is my filter cutoff, and this is my resonance, and this is my decay, and whatever you've set up as those CC messages. So it's very cool. It's a very cool and very usable new function, as a lot of these are, which I think that was kind of the common theme for me, was that a lot of these functions that they added to this are real user functions. Like, these are things that, yeah, it's got more tracks and things like that. That's cool and all, but a lot of these functions that are the under the hood functions, like the quantizing to scale, the assignable compressor channels, things like renaming MIDI sends and that stuff, kits, those are really usable for people that are using these machines to perform with. They weren't as necessary if you were just using this in a studio or at home, but to be able to have things set up that you can perform with and that you can access easily is crazy useful. Okay, so let's see here. Yeah, MIDI knobs can be labeled, absolutely. Maybe VCV rack will be a good temporary free alternative to get. Yeah, VCV rack is cool if you've already got a DAW and you're interested in maybe getting into modular. It's a cool way to play around with modular. The thing that I don't like about VCV rack is that it lacks my favorite thing about modular, which is the tactile knob slider button response that you get from the modules. For me, if I'm going to be using a mouse to click and move things, I might as well just be doing it in the DAW. And VCV rack for me, I don't know if you guys what DAWs you've used, but if you've used Reason or Pro Tools, the one that has the cables that you can cable and you can kind of click and drag to route routings. That's what VCV rack feels like to me. But it's great if you want to see if you're interested in it and to start to learn how to use it. You can learn within VCV rack before you ever have to spend $1 on actual modules, which is a huge plus. Let's see, sequencing the new kits, if the pattern is the same, or do it on the fly. So just to explain, kits versus patterns. So it used to be, and it still can be this way, that a pattern can be saved with a kit. But just like on the Analog Rhythm and on the Percons and a few other machines, you can also have kits be separate from patterns. So you can save your pattern with your kit, and then when you load up the kit, it loads up when you load up the pattern, it loads up that kit, so you've got all your sounds. So if that's the way you perform, that's great. But if you're performing and you've got a pattern that's going and you want to change the sounds but keep the same pattern, you can load a new kit on top of it. So you can keep the same sequence and then just change up the instruments that are playing that sequence, where in the past, you would change the sequence and all the instruments would change too. So you could do it either way, which is really, really handy with this for live performance. So if you've got things that are really kind of basic, like a 4 on the floor kick and an offbeat hat, you don't need to save a new pattern and change up the pattern. And especially if you've modified it on the fly while you're playing, and let's say you made that 4 on the floor kick a breakbeat kick, then you load a new kit and you're loading it onto the breakbeat and not just the 4 on the floor, rather than trying to load something that has the breakbeat and a new kit together, loading it, which is what you had to do in the past. Now you have the flexibility to do either or, which I think is very useful. Use the Digitakt 2 for backing tracks. Yeah, I mean, you could use the Digitakt 1 for backing tracks. So it was very usable and continues to be. Let's see, can you use the Digitakt? I wish Electron would understand how badly something like Octaedit is needed. Yeah, I understand that. Again, the Octatrack is this weird beast. Most things, when they get long in the tooth, like the Octatrack is, and it's been around for a long time, 15 plus years now, I think. When something's been around that long, generally people aren't using it anymore. So you don't need to keep updating it and upgrading it and improving it. If you think about any other piece of gear that's 15 years old, nobody's making new things for 15-year-old piece of gear. But with the Octatrack, it has stayed just as popular, if not more popular than it's ever been. And it's hard because it's a totally different operating system than what they're using now in all of their new machines. Everything else that they're using now is using all the same basic building blocks. And the Octatrack is a totally different software. And the guy who designed it is no longer with Electron, hasn't been for quite a while. He's actually with ASM now? Hydrosynth, yeah, I think ASM. So So because of that, they've kind of it's not their first priority. I think if anything, they're probably trying to build something that will at some point replace it. Here, let me see here. Sorry, I don't want to lose power. I think I have a camera that's about to lose power, but we'll see. One sec. I'm just gonna mess with this really quick. I hate when stuff is flashing at me. Let's see. Well, hopefully we don't lose the overhead view, but if we do, sorry about that, and we'll keep going with the other stuff. So anyway, I think they're probably going to be building something to replace the Octatrack at some point. I mean, they have to. It's such a popular piece of machinery, and they're not just going to give up on it, give up on that segment of the market. But it won't be an Octatrack Mark III. They're not going to improve on what they've done here. I think it will be something built on the new building blocks that they'll build that will have some different sampling capabilities and looping and effects and the stuff that this does, but in a more modern version. Let's see here. No more manual diving for CCs while jamming. Yes, I love that. The MIDI learn is great because then you don't have to have your manual for every synth that you're using and then sit there and dig through and find numbers and do that stuff. Having MIDI learn is very, very handy. Reason, yes, it was Reason. Hail Mary question here. Digitone successor when? I would say, well, I'll say two things. I think it's definitely coming. I mean, I don't know, I don't have any inside information, but I think it's definitely coming. It has to at some point, and obviously the Digitakt 2 coming out makes that just that much more likely. I think that they're probably gonna try to get some mileage out of this first. And if I'm not wrong, I think the Digitone came out about a year after the Digitakt. So maybe they'll stick to that same schedule, and maybe this time next year, just before Super Booth, maybe they'll be putting out a Digitone 2, something like that. But I mean, it has to come. There's a lot of functional upgrades that now the Digitakt 2 has that I think the Digitone 2 would benefit from. Sequencing more channels. It'll probably have more polyphony. It'll probably, it might even have more FM operators. Like I think they'll just boost up everything, kind of like what they did with the Digitakt 2. But I would be surprised if it came out anytime within the next, before this time next year, because I think they're putting everything into this right now and making sure this launch goes well, and they wouldn't want to steal any thunder from this by putting out a second machine right away. But I think they will. I mean, it's kind of inevitable. I think that's way more likely than an Octatrack 3 in my opinion. Okay, let's see here. Reason, yes, Reason. Did it come out pretty quickly after the OG Digitakt? I thought it was a year, but I could be wrong. But yeah, I think it would be, yeah. Have a reworked ARP. It might. I think if we learned anything from the release of the Digitakt 2 is that their idea of let's come up with a new version of a machine that people really love is let's improve everything. We may not put in everything that everybody wants, but let's improve everything that we have in there and add some new things as well. So I think that the Digitone 2, whenever that comes out, will do something similar. I think it will upgrade everything that's in it to another level, which I think would be cool. And again, with this, went from 8 tracks to 16. So do we see the Digitone 2 going from 4 tracks to 8? Or does it go all the way to 16? Who knows? Does polyphony increase? Does it become a you know, 12, 16, whatever voice, who knows? I have no idea. But I think that what we can count on now that we've learned it from this machine is that when they come out with a Mark II, they're gonna upgrade everything. They're going to improve everything. I think there's also certain things from the Digitakt 2 that will find their way into the original Digitakt, into the original Digitone, into the Syntakt, things like that. Just like we saw the Euclidean sequencer find its way from the rhythm upgrade into this. I think they were probably building it for this and said, hey, let's get it out there first to kind of keep things moving along and keep improving the rhythm. So that's something we can actually talk about right now is the Euclidean sequencer, which just to show a little bit of the difference between the Euclidean sequencer that the Digitakt 2 and the analog rhythm both have compared with the Euclidean sequencer that the Oxy 1 has. Because again, just like with everything, there's a reason why I use both of these, and it's because each one does different things better than the other. So if we are, let's just stick with our track 16 here, since we happen to be here. So if we do function sequencer, that takes us to the Euclidean sequencer, and you can either turn it off or on. It doesn't automatically go on by going there. One thing you'll see when you go, and I don't know how well you can see this, I'm sorry for not having a zoomed in view here, but the, in the Euclidean sequencer it's the same one, by the way, that's in this and that's in the analog rhythm. Having used both, they're both the same, and I'll show you how they're different from the Oxy in a sec. So if you notice here, you've got the length, which is kind of standard. So you can set this to anywhere all the way up to 128 steps because you have a 128 step sequencer, which is pretty cool. I tend to keep Euclidean sequences 16 or less. And again, for the type of music that I do, it's very repetitive, so that's very hypnotic. And with 16, I can see everything that's going on in front of me on the sequencer. So if we set this to 16 steps, it's going to be just on here. Then, as with every other Euclidean sequencer, you add pulses. So if we add one pulse to our, I got to turn it on. So if we turn it on, you'll notice that the record turns blue. That means we're in Euclidean mode. If you turn it off, it's red, and that means we're in regular sequencer mode. So if we turn it on, it's blue. Then we start adding pulses. So if we add one pulse, we're gonna have one pulse on step 1. The Euclidean sequencers divide your length in the most even way possible. So sometimes you can't divide evenly. 16 divided by 1 is 1, so that's why that goes there. If we add a second pulse, so we have 2, it gives us a pulse on 1 and 9, because that's 16 divided evenly into 2 parts. But then when we get to 3 pulses, you can't divide 16 by 3. So what it will do is it spreads them out as evenly as it can to keep it still within that that math problem, right? So that's kind of your basic Euclidean sequencer. And as you add pulses, it will do division. So you add 4, you can divide 16 by 4 equally. So that's why you have this. You can go up to 7. You can't divide 16 by 7. So that's why you get these uneven things. And again, what makes this cool is the fact that this can give you some really cool rhythms. So like, let's just find a random percussion thing. What is it? Sorry. Let's just find let's just go into this one. So now we've just got a random percussion sample on here. So if I go back to this and I just do my kick and rumble with this random percussion sample. So that we're hearing right now is these steps that are in the Euclidean sequencer. So if I start to add more steps in there, it changes it up. So that's kind of the first form of Euclidean sequencer. Another thing that you can do with this is you can rotate it. So if you watch where these steps are, I don't know how well you can see this, but if you watch where these steps are and I rotate it by 1, it moves everything by 1 step over. And eventually when they get to the end of the length, it will put them back at the beginning. So watch 15, then goes to 16, and I go 1 more, and it goes back to 1. So if we have a note on that, it will rotate those notes around, which is pretty cool as well. So we can take this rotation back to 0. That's back to our original pattern that we had. Now, the thing that's different about this from a lot of traditional Euclidean sequencers is those 5 pulses that we have in this 16-step sequence is one sequencer. There's a second one in here, so you can add more pulses. So let's add, so we've got 2, you can see that they're both here. So if we go and we keep adding, it's an additional group of pulses that are with this. And then you have what's called a Boolean operator that will do OR, XOR, and sub. And what that is, each one of those things will have these act differently if those 2 Euclidean sequences line up on a step. So if it gets to a step and they're both there and it's on OR, it will play one or the other. If it gets to an AND, it will only play if they're both there, but it won't play the other ones. So you can change how they interact with one another. So now if I start to change that, and these are the only steps where they're both showing up. But now if I start to add new pulses, now there are more times when both hit on the same step. So it will only play if it's on the AND. So again, a lot of variety can be had from having this type of Euclidean sequencer because you've got 2 different ones that will play off of each other based on the Boolean operators. Then you have the ability to rotate 1, rotate 2, or this rotation is rotating both of them together. So you're rotating them all together. So you've got a ton of flexibility within the Euclidean sequencer here. In the Oxy 1, it's a single Euclidean sequencer. So it's doing the same as one of these. You can still rotate and you can still do the same pulse thing, the same as you're doing it on here, but you don't have the operator because you're not playing between the 2 that you are here. And so you have a little bit less randomization and less ability to have kind of 2 playing off the other and changing those up when you're playing live. Now, why wouldn't you just go with this one? Well, the difference is this one, if I go into the Euclidean sequencer and I go into this randomization mode, so let's go to, let's just go to our baseline that's here. So I'll keep my kick and then I'll just put a bass in here. So if I wanted to go in, let's say I generated that with my Euclidean sequencer, which I didn't, but let's just say that I did. I can go into the randomization mode here and I can just randomize pitch and leave those sequences the same. So if I hit this, track here. Okay, so now if I go in and I hit pitch, and I can change the range, so if I want this to go crazy. So you can see, you can do that, and then you can go back. You've got undo and redo, so you can kind of go back to where you were. So being able to generate pitch, which is also in key, by the way, so that's whatever key I have the Oxy set to. When I randomly generate pitch on those triggers that I put down, those gates, it keeps it in key. This can't do that exactly. And I'm gonna go into something in a second that shows you what it can do. But this gives me a lot of flexibility performing live to just generate. Okay, I like that one, and now let's go with it. And let's start sound designing and let's keep the music going. With this one, it's a bit harder to do that. So yesterday when I got this, I was on I jumped on a Zoom call with Travarsi. If anybody knows her, you should check out her YouTube channel. Fantastic modular performer. I've done a lot of gigs with her all over the world, and she's just really outstanding. When I was first getting into modular, she was one of the first people I called because she knows her shit probably better than anybody else. So if you don't already follow her channel. But we were going over the Digitakt 2 yesterday because she just got hers as well. And one of the things that she mentioned was we started going in saying, I wonder how we can combine these things. So I showed her that you can do that random note generation in key. I showed her that you can quantize to key, which was not something that she had done yet. And then she was like, well, wait a minute, what if we use that with this? And she came up with this cool idea. So I'm gonna see if I can replicate this. I just first wanna go into, I wanna find a note, a synth note. Let's find something here that's, okay, so that'll be a bit more tonal. Let's see if that worked. So now if we go back to our track here, so this is our notes that we have in the Euclidean sequencer. But if we were to go over to the traditional sequencer, so if you hold function, if we're in sequencer mode, if you hold function and turn the Euclidean off, you'll notice all those triggers that were blue are now red. So now we're in kind of the traditional sequencer mode. So what you can do with this is if you lock, if you parameter lock by pressing and turning, like what we were saying before, that will keep it in the key that you have. So you can parameter lock individual notes, right? And then when you play this sequence, so you've still got your same thing, and those notes are in key. So if we were to go now back to the Euclidean mode, those are still here. And if I rotate this, and take the operator off here. So now I can rotate this, and it's keeping those notes rotating with it. So it's keeping them with that thing. And now if I add extra notes or take notes away, you'll notice that now I've only got 4 notes, for example, but I've still got one that's parameter locked here. So if we go to that trigger and hold it down, it's still parameter locked. So you can pull over the locks that you had in key into your Euclidean sequencer, and then you can add more notes or add more triggers in, and it will find the closest one of those locks. So if it happens to be one of those locks, you can still use it like that. So it gives you the ability to keep things in key while generating some relatively random notes that you're generating kind of randomly through the Euclidean sequencer. So it allows you to use them really together in a creative way. It's still different from what the Oxy does. I think what this does has its own kind of level of creativity. And now what the Digitakt 2 has a different type of creativity and some really cool workflows that you can't do on the Oxy. And the Oxy has workflows you can't do on the Digitakt 2. So you might hear Euclidean sequencer and just think, okay, well, this has one and this has one, so they're the same. But in effect, they're both very, very different in the way that they work. And I think each one of them will have its own kind of creative workflow. I tend to like to sequence things more in the Digitakt 2 if they are percussive, or if it's something that I'm going to be locking parameters of the individual synth that I'm using, or not synth, the individual sample that I'm using. If I want to lock parameters like effects or things like that, if I want to keep those locked, I'll use the electron sequencer and that workflow for doing that. The Oxy, I'm still going to be sequencing a lot of things in the Digitakt from the Oxy, because doing this Euclidean and then dialing in the notes and things like that, it has its place. And even if you're not using the Euclidean, like if you wanted to, just use the traditional sequencer and parameter lock those notes to key, being able to do that is still really super handy and really fast. You can do that in the Oxy as well as the random note generation in key. So for certain channels, for certain tracks and certain sequences, I will use the Oxy sequencer still to sequence the Digitakt. So anything that's going to be a one shot, that's going to be more tonal, kind of melodic, and I want to make sure that it's in key with what I'm doing in the modular and everything like that, I'm still going to sequence that from the Oxy so that I can keep everything kind of on the same page as far as key and notes and things like that. But anything that is internal parameter locking type stuff and drum stuff, I'm still going to do that within the Digitakt. So I think they work really well hand in hand, and that's why I do them. And I couldn't replace the Oxy with the Digitakt because that would be a whole different workflow for my modular. The Oxy is sending out CV and gate. I can show you this here. So there is a single cable, which is right here. You might not be able to see it because it's on the edge. But it sends out, if I slide this over, you might be able to see it for a sec. Yeah. So this module that's here on the very end is called the Oxy pipe. And it is a specific module from Oxy that allows you to connect an HDMI cable from the Oxy One to this module and send 8 CV and 8 gate over HDMI. And the reason why that's cool is because if you notice, I have everything patched from here. So all my CV and gate that's going out to my voices in here that are being controlled. So like the pizza, the swarm, and the BIA are all being controlled via CV and gate from the Oxy. So I can send all those out. I can leave those patched. And when I go to close this up and get ready to like go for a gig, all I have to do is unplug that one cable and I can leave my whole modular patched with that. So I have that doing that, and then this cable is coming out MIDI from the Oxy. So all I have to do to disconnect this is one MIDI cable, one HDMI cable, and these 2 master outs. And then everything else stays patched while I travel. And then when I show up at a gig, I plop this down, I connect my 2 master outs, my 1 MIDI cable, and my 1 HDMI, and the whole thing's ready to go with an external sequencer. So that's really the reason why this is key for what's going on here, is the fact that I can control, I can keep things in key, I can have multiple sequencers and do all that for what's going on here. And it connects really easily with the whole workflow that I'm doing on the Digitakt 2 for drums, atmospheres, vocals, longer samples, things like that. So I think they play really well together. And my setup is really designed to be as kind of like tight as it can be to still give me a ton of possibilities of voices. So if you look at this, I have 6 drum tracks, actually 7, let's call it 8, because everybody's gonna use this differently. Then I have 8 voices here that I can sequence from the Oxy. I have 8 voices in the Oxy choral that I can sequence from here as well. So that's 16. The pizza, the swarm, and the BIA. So that's 17, 18, 19. So I have 19 voices that I can independently control and sequence, but all keep within the same key using the Oxy. And so I've got all of those voices plus 8 tracks of drums. So it gets us up to 27 voices, 27 tracks of potential control, sequencing, all of that kind of stuff. So it really does give me a lot of flexibility to play live, because again, if you've seen me play live or if you know how I perform live, it's because it's improvised. I need a lot of paints on my palette, because I need a lot of things I can just kind of go to in a moment that I know are sounds that I like. So I'll preset sounds in here, in the Digitakt 2, like I used to in the Syntakt. And then I have preset sounds. It's weird to say preset because there aren't presets in most of these modules. There are in the Oxy Choral, but in all the others, there's no preset. But for me, the preset is the fact that I put a BIA. The BIA is the preset. I put the swarm, and the swarm is the preset. That's the sound that I like is the sound of the swarm, the sound of the BIA, the sound of the pizza. So it gives me the ability to kind of go to those sounds that I like and use those in a handy way. So let's jump back over here and see what this looks like. Let's see here. Electron should produce a power bank for their devices. Yeah, I don't know that they ever will because that's not their game, but everybody else has got one. So you could actually use, there's a couple different types of companies that make the transformer cords. The ones that I've had the best luck with are the Bird cord. So using the Bird cord to power these battery powered is great, just with a power bank on the side. Just make sure that your power bank puts out enough amps in order to power what you need, because so the Digitakt, let's see, Digitakt, Digitone, and I can't remember, I thought there was one other one. They only need 1 amp because they're digital, so they don't draw as much power. The Syntakt, the analog heat, and I think the Octatrack may only need 1 amp as well, I don't remember. But Syntakt and analog heat need 2 amps. So your power bank has to be able to put out at least 2 amps so you don't damage your machines, but just double check on those just to make sure. And if you've got a 2 amp one, you're kind of covered for any of them. Then you can battery power any of these using a Bird cord with their 12 volt adapter. So it's a cool way to be able to use these battery powered. I know that we would all like them to be battery powered, or you can mod them, but then you void your warranty. But talk to EasyBot. He's got an Octatrack, a gray Octatrack that's modded with an internal battery. That's a rechargeable battery. That's pretty cool. So you can kind of take it anywhere and use it. But he's the Octatrack dude, so of course he would have one of those. Let's see here. Reworked ARP, yeah, maybe. Firmware Analog Rhythm is still my #1, or Digitakt 2, new favorite. Analog Rhythm is still my #1, and I'll tell you why. So Digitakt 2 has become my #1 for my live set. And because it's smaller and it does a lot of what the Rhythm does now in a much smaller package. And it has more tracks and blah, 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 all that stuff. The Rhythm is the only machine in the whole lineup that has the ability to use analog synth engines and samples layered on the same track. Now, why is that important? I use the Rhythm Mark II in particular, but it works on the one as well. It's just easier to use the screen on the Mark II. I use that to make the drum samples that I will use in the Digitakt for live performance. So what I'll do is I'll take a sample of a 909, because I don't have a 909. I'll take a sample of a 909 and then I'll layer it with an analog drum synth to be able to give it, more of an attack, or more of a rumble at the end of it, or things like that. I can modify the sound of that, layer the two together, and then very easily resample that into a new sample that I can then load in the Digitakt or load on the Rhythm, which is what I was doing when I had that. The only reason, I still have it, but when I was using it in live performance, the biggest difference is the size. I needed, it was as big as my modular case just for the Rhythm. And so this is much, much smaller. I can chuck it in my backpack. I can take it on the plane with me. So it will be a lot more usable. But from a sound design perspective, and just a pure sound perspective, the Rhythm is my absolute favorite drum machine of all time. I'm happy to argue with people about that. There's people that are like, oh, it doesn't sound that good. It sounds fantastic. And if you're not getting it to sound good, it's because you're not using it properly. By adding that master overdrive, that and using some of the analog engines properly, you can get an absolutely amazing, crazy powerful thick sound. One reason why a lot of people don't like the way the analog rhythm sounds is because you don't have speakers or headphones that have a low enough bass response that you're getting the full power of it. When you use it on a big system with subs, that's when it really shines through. The power of that sound that comes out of that is crazy. But you have to be able to hear it. And if you don't have speakers that have a low enough response, you're not going to hear it. So make sure you do that before you throw that away. But yeah, definitely it is, rhythm is still my number one and will continue to be. And you know, as a groove box too, because the fact that it has analog synth engines, it's got the dual VCO, they added the new synth engines on there. You can do the same that you're doing with drums, but with synths and samples. So like you could create this cool like kind of synth analog pad sound or analog, you know, synth, you know, one shot sound. And then you could layer that with, you know, strings on a sample and turn that into one sample, one sound that you, by resampling, that you could then play on the Digitakt or play on the rhythm. So that's why it's still my favorite, is just because of the power of being able to have synth and sample in one machine. It's pretty amazing. Let's see here. Robin, are you still using the cycles? Sounds like you're using the samples from it in something else. Let's see. Euclidean doesn't use micro timing for full resolution, so the results are the same as adding those trigs manually. Kind of, yes. I mean, yes, they are in general, but that's where having a Euclidean sequencer is cool for this type of music, because you can change the length of it, which changes the divisions. So if you go from 16 steps to 15 steps and you had 9 trigs and you go to, and you keep those same 9 into 15, it's going to move them around where they are. So getting those jumps to the nearest division is where you come up with some really cool stuff that stays within within kind of the structure. If you wanted to do this completely free of that, it's probably not the right machine to do that, to make those completely free of that, if that makes sense. All right, let's see here. So I thought the point of the Euclidean was, yeah, I mean, that is a point of Euclidean, but what makes it really, really cool is that that jumping to the nearest kind of resolution makes it very cool that way. So here, let's see here. So with this, so in the Digitakt 2, you can use micro timing after you've got them set. So for example, if you set them into a thing, you can micro time and push it off, just like you can on a traditional on the traditional sequencer. And I'm pretty sure, let's see if this does that. Yeah, so if you then hold function and turn the Euclidean off, it keeps that micro timing when you move that off, and it keeps it when you rotate. So you can add the micro timing as an after, but it doesn't automatically use the micro timing. Like the automatic is on grid. I don't know if there's a way to change that off grid. If you know, put that in the comments, because I know you can. I know you can record off grid, so there may be a way to take that off and kind of do what you want to do, but I'm not sure if it's possible. So yeah, let's see here. Robin's using a Digitone as well. Yes, it is a great machine. I actually sold mine when I got the Digitakt, because I was, again, just using it for multiple voices in one box, and the Digitakt gave me even more voices in one box and the ability to do FM-ish stuff. and I wasn't really using the FM sound for what it is. The only thing that I really tend to use FM for in my sound is either percussion, so I can sample those in pretty easily, or basses. And you know, if we go to, let's see here, if we go back to my so this bass, the Bastel Pizza, does that for me. That kind of FM-y bass sound. So I get a lot of that from the Bastel Pizza anyway. So I don't really need a full FM synth besides that, because I'm not using it a lot for melodic stuff. It's mostly for that kind of metallic sounding, the more metallic sounding percussive stuff or bass lines. And I can get that metallic sound out of the BIA and with samples, and I can get the percussive stuff, or sorry, the bass stuff out of the pizza. So it gives me a little bit of that same flexibility, because I'm not using it for the reason why a lot of people would use it. And that's another reason why the polyphony that it has isn't that important for me. But for a lot of people it is, depending on the style of music you're doing. If you're playing, like, if you want to have that kind of classic, like DX7 FM chord, you know, chimey, choir sounding stuff, then yeah, it's very cool. But that's not necessarily my my style. Let's see what else. Considering budget, I'm eyeing an Arturia Mini Freak and or Behringer Edge Digitone also, if I find something cheap. If you want a cheap Digitone, wait till Digitone 2 comes out. I would say you're gonna find, if the Digitone or Digitakt 1 pricing is anything, they kind of tanked recently, obviously. So yeah, you can get that. I can tell you that Arturia Mini Freak, a friend of mine has one, and he brought it over and we played around with it, and that thing sounds so good. I mean, for the price of that, you'd be hard pressed to find something with that much flexibility and that solid of a sound in that price range. Like, it's bang for the buck. It's a killer synth. I really love it. I think it's awesome. You know, if you wanted to have a keyboard to take with a live setup where you could play keys and have some presets with some really cool sounds, it's amazing. I think it's value for the dollar. It's really, really amazing. As a studio machine, it's good as well. I would have a hard time justifying it with the Polybrute, which is my one polysynth that I have here in my studio. Having that, I think that just gives me a lot of that range. But you know, for something to take with you and have as a polyphonic synth that you bring out as a live rig, man, it's solid. They did a good one with that one because it's got a great sound, and they kept the price really really affordable. So yeah, I think that the Mini Freak is awesome. Sick improv bassline technique. Thanks. What do you think about the quadranted swarm? I want to sell it because it's a limited synth, or am I doing something wrong? You're doing something wrong. This thing, let's play around with this for a minute here so we can see what we're doing. Take my bass out and go back into my swarm. Let's see here. I just want to make sure I've got my... Take all the effects off it so you can just hear this. So that's the swarm, and you can hear it can sound pretty simple, but you've also got the possibility to, just by really quick changing up, adding the perk, changing up the spread, then you can make these two filters. Right now they're both set to low pass, but you can make this one a high pass instead. then you put that through some minimal effects. Like if I put this through my Ghost, and so that's one of the engines. That's the organ engine, but you've got 8 different engines. So if I was to change this up like to the metal, you know, we were talking about that FM kind of chimey sound. You've got that here. If I was to change this up to the chip tune, gives me chip tune sound. I've got granular. I've got reeds. So yeah, basically no shortage of sound variation. No shortage of sound variation in the Swarm. One thing that you'll see with all of my gear, anything that goes into my live setup has to have a ton of variety within whatever size that it's taking up. The fact that that has 2 filters that you can put as a high pass and low pass, you can make it act as like the MS-20 dual filters, gives it a ton of character, a ton of variety. You've got the spread in character, so you're kind of changing up the way the waves interact with one another. You have a perk, so you can add transients to it. You've also got an envelope built in, so you heard I can make the decay longer or shortage, so shorter, so you can give it, you know, a ton of different sounds. It has a built-in LFO, so if you want to send that to different things, it has a sequencer, and then it has all those different sound engines. So all of that in one machine gives it a ton of variety. So very much like the variety you get from the Bastel Pizza that I have, the variety you get from the BIA, which can be everything from kick drums to snares to hats to bass lines to leads to percussion to anything you want, all in one unit. So that's why those things end up in my case, because they're because they have a ton of variety. And again, as I mentioned, improvising, I want to have as many paints on my palette as I can have to kind of paint the picture that I want to paint. If I get an idea, I want to be able to have something that I can make that idea with, like, really quickly on the fly. So yes, let's see. Robin has a TR-909, lucky. It's cool. Oh, TR-909 sample set loaded in my Rhythm. Yes, that's what I always did too, and that's what makes it so strong. Now I have 909 samples loaded into the Digitakt too, because I've got a lot of flexibility to do that now. Let's see here. Yes, 100% analog rhythm sounds are great. You just need to pay attention and fine tune things. That's the thing, is I think people just want to turn it on and have it make music for them. And no, you have to actually know a little bit about sound design. But once you get into it and you make those sounds, they are incredibly good and difficult to make on anything else, if possible at all to make on other stuff. So to be able to take that, dial in some really cool sounds, resample them and go, okay, now I've got this like all-in-one sample that I made from scratch that's unique, that sounds killer, and I can load that in anything. I can load that in the Digitakt, I can load it back into the Rhythm. You load it back in as a sample, and then you can layer it with another synth and do something else with it. And you can just keep layering and resampling, which is what makes that machine so great. Let's see here. Will push and turn note knob change the note in key, replace your Oxy one with Euclidean sequencer? No. And the reason being that in this, I'll use that for certain things, but I can also do that on the Oxy. I can hold it down and turn the note or turn the knob and it stays synced to key. But what I use the Oxy for is random note generation in key separate from generating the gate. So I can come up with a pattern that I like in the Oxy, and then I can generate pitch over the top of that rhythm in key randomly, with control, like with control over how much variation it has, how random it is, what's the range of notes and stuff like that. So you've got a lot of parameters that you can do, and that allows me to do it really quick on the fly. I can just set the parameters and go random, 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 random. Okay, I like this one, and then go for it. So it's very quick and very immediate. What the Digitakt 2 will do now is the ability to parameter lock in key. So I can set the rhythm and go, okay, I like this all on the root note, and then I can go in and parameter lock each individual note in key. So I'm not randomly generating them, but I have a lot more control over them, but I can also do that on the Oxy One. So it didn't add anything new that the Oxy One can't do, but it did add it to the Digitakt 2 if you don't have an Oxy One, but you do have a Digitakt 2. So gave you a lot of flexibility to do that. Let's see, where are we at? Can the LFO adjust the Euclidean? Yes. So if we go into the LFO page, you can go to destinations. So you can go to filter amp. Let's see here. Maybe. Oh no, I guess it can't. I thought it could. Let's see. Does it have to be turned on and in that mode? Nope, it can't. I thought it could. So, well, there you go. Now you know. It can't do that. Speaking of LFOs, another cool thing, outside of the Euclidean sequencer, having now the Digitakt, when the Digitakt first came out, it had one LFO per track. Then in a firmware update, they added a second LFO per track, and now the Digitakt 2 has a third LFO per track. So it's funny when people are talking about spec sheets of samplers or sequencers or things like that, it's very easy to say this and go, oh, it only has 3 LFOs, but it has 3 LFOs per track on 16 tracks. So it has 48 individually assignable LFOs. They can't be assigned cross-track, but to have 3 per track over 16 tracks gives you a crazy amount of modulation that you've got internally here. And the fact that the LFOs can modulate each other is pretty cool as well. So it gives you a lot of variation in your sound design, which I think is very cool. In a sampler, generally you see that kind of sound design flexibility in a synth, and it's another reason why this is able to replace the Syntact for me in my live shows, is that you have synth level control over samples, which is like that. The sample is the sound source instead of an oscillator, so it gives you kind of an infinite number of sound sources because you can put in any sample you want, and then you can speed it up, slow it down, bit reduction, effects, do all kinds of stuff to it like you would with a synth engine, but not having to use a synth, having the flexibility of kind of infinite samples. So that's very cool. Let's see here. Sit good with my other budget synth, Base Station 2. Yeah, that's another great synth for that. You've got some great synths. If you like if you're looking at great budget synths that go really well together, another one to look at is the Korg Monologue. But you've already got a base station, but it's got a great sound. And then the Minilog and the Minilog XD, you can get those used for like $450, $500, and you've got a polyphonic synth that sounds fantastic with built-in effects and everything for not a lot of money. So there's some great budget synths out there that you can definitely go to. Okay, let's see. Is there any A/B conditional trigger like Electron on the Oxy One? So yes, the Oxy One has the ability to do not conditional triggers. So you can do probability on the Oxy One like you can on the Electron machines, but not not conditions. So like you can on the Electron boxes. So again, it's another thing that the Electron does that the Oxy doesn't do, and there's plenty of things the Oxy does the Electron doesn't do. So that's why I'm using both of them. It's not like, well, which is the best one? It's like, well, it depends on what you want to do with it. You know, it's like comparing a sports car to a pickup truck. You know, like if you need to go fast, one is better. If you need to haul a boat, another one is better. So it just kind of depends on what your workflow is, what's going to make it work. No more Digitakt. I actually have right here my Digitakt. Still here, still very happy with it. I have it set up as part of my studio setup now. So on my desk setup behind me, I have one of those little keyboard drawers that slides out, and on that keyboard drawer, I have a Digitakt and an Oxy One, and those are my workflow for production. And this is my performance rig, and again, trying to get the most out of the fewest number of machines so that I can haul it with me. But yeah, the production setup, the Oxy One is sequencing or can sequence everything in the room through the Conductive Labs MRCC, which I have in my rack down here. So it's sending out MIDI everywhere, and it's actually controlling Ableton as well when I have Ableton turned on. So that way, the sequencers, the standard sequencers in Ableton suck. Like once you've used these sequencers and parameter locking and conditions and all that kind of stuff, the basic ones in Ableton are super lame. But there's some Max for Live ones, but you have to go down a deep rabbit hole, and they end up getting super convoluted rather than just doing kind of the things we want it to do. So that's why I've got the Digitakt for the Electron workflow going into my rig and into Ableton, and I have the Oxy One going in there too. It's my first Oxy that I got is there, and then I've got my newer one that I take with me when I'm performing live. Let's see here. Be a sick update. Yeah, MIDI log is amazing, but those knobs are tiny. They are, but I mean, I don't know. I guess just I've gotten used to modular with like tiny little knobs that you're doing on stuff. So it's like it's not that big of a thing. You're not talking like Teenage Engineering TX6 tiny knobs, like those ones that you need like tweezers to deal with. But yeah, there's a lot of small knobs in here that are the same size as they are. A lot of the knobs that are on a modular setup, like basically anything that's in this row up here that's not kind of the filter of the Ghost, these are all kind of the same size as the knobs on a mini log. And then these ones down here and the ones on the mixer are much smaller. So I guess I've just gotten kind of used to that. So for me, that doesn't make a huge difference. And the sound that you get out of the mini log is it's pretty solid. I had one for a long time. I had a mini log XD, and when I got the Polybrute, I had 3 other synths that I sold when I got that. I had a mini log XD, I had a Prologue, and I had a what did I have? Oh, a Matrix Brute. And I got all of those. I get rid of all of those to get the Polybrute, because for me, I had plenty of mono synths. I didn't need the monos, and I figured if with a Polybrute, I didn't really need the Minilog XD anymore, or the Prologue, just because for as little as I use polysynths, I kind of only needed one that could do it all, and that was why I got the Polybrute. But yeah, it was pretty strong. So I think we're caught up with the chat now. So now we can go back to a few other things about what's going on here with this. I wanted to talk a little bit more about like the live setup and how I'm going to use the Digitakt 2 kind of integrated into the live setup. It jumped in very comfortably because already it works with the workflow, and I have to say I constantly give this shout out, but I will give it forever. The shout out to EasyBot for creating the Octatrack performance template. Like, it's something that any of us could make. Like, it's, you know, the tools are all there, but the amount of brain damage that he saved every live performer in the world who has an Octatrack by creating this this performance template is really crazy, because what it did was, as somebody who came from a DJ background before live performance, I missed having DJ effects, and the last thing I wanted to do was haul around a 40-pound DJ mixer for my live sets. And, you know, I'm not at the level where I've got a rider that requires places to have a DJ mixer there, which I guess, you know, if I'm playing in a club, I can do that. I could, you know, if I really wanted to not bring the Octatrack and I was playing in a club that already had a DJ mixer, I could definitely use this setup without the Octatrack and just use their DJ mixer. But to have something that's the size of a groove box like the Octatrack that has all of the functional capabilities of a DJ mixer is pretty amazing. And because of that, I can plug and play anything. Like, if I wanted to show up and play a performance tomorrow and say, you know what, I don't want to use modular, I want to use my Syntakt and my Percons and have that, I can route those into the Octatrack and still have all the same performance capabilities that I would have with those. But with this, I didn't need that. So what I have here, and for those of you that are familiar with this, it'll be a little bit of a refresher, but I'll show you the way that I'm using it. So this performance template is set up so that there's a drum side and a melodic side. And so I have the Digitakt 2 going into the A and B inputs in the Octatrack, which is the drum side. And I have the modular case. These outputs that are coming from the WMD performance mixer are going into the C and D inputs in the Octatrack. And that's my melodic side. So what that allows me to do is to have things, performance effects that are separated, drums and melodics. So I can high pass the drums and not have the melodics change. I can high pass the melodics and not have the drums change, or I can loop or whatever. So you may also notice that there's a lot of blanks on my tape here, and it's because I'm actually building, I started to build before the Digitakt 2 came out, my own performance template using the building blocks that Matthew started with this, but there were certain effects that I wasn't really using much. I wasn't using the loopers very much, but I could. And I wanted to free up the space here to have a couple of sample tracks that I could play samples that were longer samples to take the black box out of my setup. Now that I have this, I'm going to be switching back to his regular performance template. So I don't know if you can see this, but I have another piece of tape on the front here, which is his performance template. So that's all of those scenes are on the front here, so I can still see them. So I'm actually using one or the other right now, but I'll be using his template again now that I can. Because another thing that the Digitakt 2 made possible by being able to play time stretched samples. So I didn't need to do those in here. I can do those in here now, and I can go back to having loopers and things like that in here, which are pretty cool to have in a live setup, especially if something goes wrong and you need to loop something. It's kind of cool to have that in there as well. So because I have it set up this way, I have kind of two mixers. This is really the performance mixer where everything gets summed and all of the effects are here. This is my mixer for everything that's here. And this is my mixer for everything that's here. So you've got channels 1 through 8, which are my drum channels, and channels 9 through 16, which are my melodic-ish channels in here. I also have the ability with the Oxy to mute or unmute by channel. So I can use the mutes here if I want, or I can use them in the Oxy. I can use the faders here if I want, or if I just want to mute and unmute something, I can do it from the Oxy into the modular case as well. So it gives me a lot of flexibility. So, you know, like I'll start off, for example, at the beginning of a show, and I'll have all of my tracks down because I haven't really brought anything in yet. And I'll bring things in one by one, or I may bring it in and unmute it, or I may unmute it and then bring it in. It just kind of depends on what I'm doing performance-wise. And I have the ability to do the same with the performance mixer here. The performance mixer here also has sends, which I've got one going to the Ericsson's dual effects and one going to the Ghost, and I can switch back and forth and send amounts from this mixer. I think the Ericsson's dual effects is going to go away once I maybe get to Superbooth, or when while I'm there, it's going to go away because a little bit of a spoiler here. There is a multi-effects unit that will be premiering at Superbooth from the makers of the Oxy One and the Oxy Coral. So, and this isn't too big of a spoiler because he had a video that he put out recently for the Coral where you could see it, and a lot of people were asking questions about it. So that unit will be coming out, and I'll have some videos on that and a whole bunch more talk about that. But having an assignable multi-effects unit within here that where you can add you know, effects like this, for example, you can have an effect A and an effect B, and you can choose which one you're using. With this one, you'll be able to add multiple effects together and kind of combine them very much like you can with the performance scenes in the Octatrack. So I'm very excited about that. I will be showing you guys a lot more about that at Superbooth. So check out the videos on this channel that I'll be doing at Superbooth, because we'll be talking a lot about that, that particular machine. So yeah, so that will be going in here. So those sends are when I have everything going through. I can send all of this stuff to those effects and then have them come back on their own returns in my mixer. It's loud. You can hear the sound of the Ghost. That sound in the background is just the Ghost with nothing going through it. It is an incredibly loud effects unit because it's got so much going on between, you know, reverbs and delays and distortions and overdrives and everything all in one unit. They kind of interact with each other, and you have this ground noise that's really loud, which for me is not a big deal, but for some people it's a deal breaker. But for me, I don't care. It's, you know, my stuff is loud anyway and kind of grimy anyway, so I don't care if it comes out that way. Yeah, so being able to put the Digitakt 2 into this setup was possible because of the way it's routed and because of the performance mixer, the way that it goes. So I have so the 4 sequencers in the Oxy. Sequencer 1 is controlling 3 of the voices in the modular. So the Pizza, the BIA, and the Swarm, all being controlled via CV and gate on sequencer 1. Sequencer 2, I have nothing right now. That's kind of an open one in case I added a different box, or I wanted to sequence something else, or I wanted to send out to, you know, different tracks on here, I could. Sequencer 3, all 8 tracks of this are going to the Oxy One via MIDI. So this is an 8-voice multi-timbral, and it can also be an 8-note polyphonic if you want to set it up that way. I have it set up as 8 mono voices that are each sequenced on a different track within the sequencer number 3. Multi-sequencer, so that's all going out to there. And then sequencer 4 is going to the Digitakt, and as I mentioned, I've got the drum voices are sequenced inside the Digitakt, so I can sequence this by itself, and then the melodic voices are being sequenced from out here. So it just allowed it all to kind of hook up great. When I didn't have the Digitakt 2 in here, I had the Digitakt 1, and it was acting exactly the same, except I didn't have these voices to sequence because those are all new. When I had the Syntakt, it was acting like this, and I had these voices to sequence there. So it makes it very modular without it being a modular. I know there's a modular here, but the whole setup is very modular. So if I wanted to pull out the Digitakt 2 and put the rhythm back in, or if I wanted to pull this out and put in an MPC or an SP404 or something, or a black box, I could plug those in and it would act very much in the same way. So these things can be mixed and matched, and the ones I'm using are because they're giving me what I need for my live performance. So it gives me a lot of variety, and it also gives me the ability to change it up as I want to, which is something I do a lot if you've watched my videos. So yeah, so that's how it's being used in the setup. And again, it gives me a lot of flexibility. So I want to just show a little bit about how this works. If you guys have some more questions, definitely pop them into the chat while we do this, while showing a little bit, and I'll get to those in just a minute. But I just kind of wanted to show you where this comes from. So getting started off here just with obviously kick and rumble. All right. Anyway, let's see where we're at. Enough jamming along here. Let's see. Dreadbox Typhon is great, inexpensive mono. Yes, it is. Also, small, great performance controlled. Yeah, there's a lot of cool small box monosynths. Like if you're interested in something out there, I mean, there's obviously the Minotaur. There's the what's it called? The Micro Monster thing. I've heard that one sounds really, really good as well. Some cool stuff. Look forward to Super Booth. Yes, I do too. Gear ground noise sample pack. Yes, that sounds great. I've got plenty of that. I have plenty of ground noise in the studio, so I should probably sample it all. It'll sound like the people that sample with that, what's that Soma, the thing that picks up like electrical interference, and people have sampled that. That's what my whole studio would sound like if I'd sampled in here. It would be bizarre. Let's see here. Exactly. It's not a bug, it's a feature. I agree, Robin. So I actually always joke about that. Like if I had clean sounding stuff, I would have to have additional modules and additional gear to dirty it up, because that's a sound that I like. And you know, going back to the very beginning when we were talking about using saturation to kind of fill out and make things sound better. Honestly, to be honest with you, ground noise does the same thing. It's just adding different tones and harmonics. And with that, that's just a ground noise through a filter. So yeah, being able to use it to your advantage, right? It's techno. If you think about it, where did techno start? It started from the sounds of industry. The idea was the people that were originally making techno, whether you know it was the original guys in Detroit or the original guys in Germany, and you know whether it was Kraftwerk or whether it was the Juan Atkins and those guys, they were taking the sounds of industrial machines that they were hearing around them, and so this whole idea of making things like clean and pristine and perfect, for me, that kind of goes against the whole foundation of it. Like it's supposed to be raw and rough. It's supposed to be, at least the type of techno that I'm making, it's supposed to be raw and rough and have its grit and have its kind of throwback to what was going on back in those days. So yeah, definitely. Let's see here. I always sample noise in my Ableton tracks. I actually want the ground noise from my gear. Sure, I'll get you the gear. I will get you the sound of my gear if you want that. You already sampled my voice in one of your tracks, which I thought was really funny. Tape Pusher, if you go to his channel, he did a sample of me saying something, but it was from one of my YouTube videos, and he sampled it and put it in one of his tracks. It was very funny, but thank you for that. I've never been, I don't think I'd ever been sampled before that, so it was pretty funny. Let's see, exactly part of the 909 and other samples in the 8. They're colored. Yeah, that's the whole thing. Like, it's so funny. It's this kind of contradiction for me. People talk about wanting clean sound and they go down these weird rabbit holes of, compressing this and doing that and processing this signal this way to clean this and noise gates and whatever. And it's like, then on the same breath, they're saying, well, I like analog machines more than digital because they sound warm. You know what warmth is in analog machines? It's the dirt from the heating up of the analog circuitry. So you want a dirty sound by saying that you like the warmth of analog. That's a dirty sound that's making that sound warm. And then in the same breath you say, yeah, but I want to take that dirty analog sound and I want to clean it up with a gate and a compressor and a whatever. It's like, what? Like you're confused. Take advantage of it. Take advantage of those cool sounds and those things that are random. That's what's going to make your stuff sound better and unique and individual to you. If you're trying to make that same exact sound that every other artist out there is making, why would you want to do that? Why not come up with your own sounds? Why not come up with something original and make it your own unique thing? So Coming up next, Circo's official artisan noise sample pack. Yeah. Yeah. I have just now started down the sample pack realm, so maybe an artisan noise sample pack is in the works. I have one sample pack available on my website, which is from the Percons. I decided to sample that because people were asking, since not a lot of people got one, but they wanted to use it. So yeah. Yeah, it sounds more natural and not as processed. And the irony is people will process things to death to get that sound that you could just get by using things that are less than perfect. And I think that people want this like pristine sound, and then they want to process it so that it sounds warm. It's like, no, take a grimy sound and let it be what it is. If you want a pristine sound, that's great, but use it as that. You know, if you want like a crystal clear FM, like a bell tone, awesome. Use that. But don't say, oh, it sounds digital, now I want to grime it up. Okay, well, then just use something that's more grimy in the first place and you're going to get that cool sound. More distortion. Yeah, everything should have more distortion to it. If you have more questions about the Digitakt 2 or anything else, go ahead and chuck them in there. We've got a few more minutes left here, so I want to make sure I get to anybody's questions that you have, and a little bit more of the chat. Just really quick, there's some things if you want to do some support for the channel, you can, in the link or the description below, there's links for affiliate links for gear. So if you want to go, I've got a couple different shops there. So if you want to go to Perfect Circuit, there's one there. If you want to go to Zounds, there's one there. So you can go ahead and, you know, get your gear from whoever you choose to get your gear from. And then you can head on over to the Patreon, which is patreon.com/Circo. And that will, there's a couple different levels. There's a free level, which I basically make any of the posts that are on there are basically available to the free level just to get people to come over and just kind of hang out. If you want to be part of the kind of chat community, they don't let that, you know, they don't let me link the Discord and the Patreon chat to the free level. So there's a $1 level to do that. And basically all that does is just allow me to open it up to other people, which it is a little good that it does keep the spammers off there for the most part, because the spammers don't want to pay to join anything, even if it's $1. So you can go ahead and do that. And then there's a couple other levels too. We're starting to build up these Saturday group coaching calls, which are tons of fun. It's $40 a month, so it's like $10 per call. You get one every Saturday, and it's kind of a group coaching thing where you get together and I kind of teach a little bit one-on-one. I answer questions. Everybody kind of feeds off of each other's questions, which I think is great too, because people will ask something that they didn't even know. Like someone will ask something that you didn't even know you wanted to get answered, but because they asked it, you got the information as well. So it's pretty cool. We had a great call this morning. It was a lot of fun, and have some interesting people on there that are kind of doing this from all different angles and learning from each other and at different levels, which is a lot of fun. And then if you want to do a more personal level, there's a one that's $120 a month, and that includes a one-on-one group coach or a one-on-one call plus all of the group coaching calls. It gets you free all of the sample packs, which right now is one, but there are more coming. You get those for free, and you get kind of a flat 20% discount off of any of the stuff in my web store. So if you want to get any of the merch and hats and t-shirts, whatever, you can do that. You get standing discount for that as well. So yeah, so those are things you can do. I appreciate any of that help. Things have changed for me a bit recently. I stopped my job that I was working for the last few years in January, started my own company for food and beverage consulting, which is what I do is kind of my day job, and wanted to build this out as well as something as well, so that it kind of helps support everything else that I'm doing. So I appreciate any help. Join in, love to have you, and starting to have some lots of fun with the people in the group calls and some of the individual ones as well. So let's see here. It's okay if sound interferes a bit with each other, that you get those interesting artifacts. Yeah, it's, you know, this is, it's one of the reasons, it's one of the things that I love about techno is that it can be, and in my opinion, should be imperfect. It should be something that's really, you know, the whole phrase, the whole term techno was coined, is it was technology, it was sounds from the future. If you listen to Jeff Mills talk, he talks about how techno is the sound of the future. And no matter what time you're in, you know, they were in a time in the late 80s when they were kind of starting up with this stuff, and it was the sound of the future that we live in now. And so our techno today is the sound of the future from today. So come up with new stuff, invent things, invent sounds, create. And, you know, getting back on to kind of the topic of the Digitakt 2, that's one of the things that's so cool about it, is that it gives you the ability to create and come up with stuff that you may not have, because it's got, you know, so many new things that you can do with that sound. Like just in the effects, like if you just go into the effects page, you used to have a delay and a reverb and an overdrive, and that was pretty much it. Now you have sample rate reduction, bit reduction, and a chorus. Okay, well, that's really awesome, because now you can put anything into it. It could be the sound of the ground noise from my studio, and then you can put a comb filter on it to pick out a harmonic, and then add an overdrive and a delay to it, and all of a sudden you have some cool new sound that you would have never had before. And so just being able to do that within this machine is pretty incredibly powerful. And it's you know, these two machines that I have here, the Digitakt and the Octatrack, when you're talking about having power of changing sound and manipulating sound, between the two of them, they can do a pretty incredible amount of that. So pretty amazing machines. And especially when you've got things like a modular feeding into them, it gives you a whole bunch of power there. Congrats on the new company. Thank you very much. It's a lot of work getting it up and running. So if anybody knows anybody that needs food and beverage consulting, send them my way. 'Cause it's what I've been doing for the last 10 years, but working for another firm. And so starting my own company has been great. One of my favorite things about it is, and I'll talk about this in some of the videos for going to Superbooth, is that I travel a ton for my job. I think I did over 50 flights last year. Most of them were from work. And what that allows me is a ton of points and lounge access and the ability to upgrade and stuff like that. So when I go to take a trip for a show like Superbooth, it allows me to do upgrades with the points that I had so that I can travel comfortably. And so it's nice. It's a nice perk of the job. So it's nice that they kind of work together for each other. So yes, busy schedule, but that's what I'm trying to do. So happy to be even busier. So if anybody would like to get involved in the group calls that we do, head on over to Patreon. Even if you don't want to get involved in that, go over to Patreon anyway and just sign up, because then you'll get all of my posts, and I kind of post YouTube videos over there so you don't have to have commercials, and you can see that stuff, and that's all in the free stuff, so you can do that as well. And then again, with the $1 one, that's like Discord and the Patreon community. That's kind of a new thing that we're starting, that I haven't used it much, but we're trying to use it a bit more. So it's pretty cool to do that over there. And so yeah, jump on over there for that. And if you want to do any of the group coaching or the one-on-one coaching, you can sign up for that there as well. Machine sounds that cannot be defined. Yeah, that's, you know, there was an interview with Jeff Mills. I think it was in one of those documentaries about like the history of techno. And he was talking about that. And he was like, that whole idea of sounds from the future that he talks about is that it's like, the sound should be new and different. And I've always been a big fan of those kind of creative, new futuristic sounds in techno being mixed with more traditional sounds. So if you notice, I use a lot of kind of traditional percussion. So I like things like tribal percussion and congas and wood blocks and things like that are very kind of analog, paired with digital sounds from the future, and kind of mixing the two together. And I think that makes for really interesting techno music. And so that's what I try to do, but everybody's got their own thing, and everybody does it a little bit differently, which is another thing that's pretty beautiful about it, is that. Is anybody that's on the chat here going to be at Superbooth? Let me know in the chat if you are, and I would love to meet up with anybody that's going to be there. It's one of my favorite things about Superbooth. You know, obviously the gear is very cool, but meeting up with the people that go, and, you know, kind of synth geeks, and being able to talk music and synthesizers and gear and hang out a little together and walk around and see the gear together and have a beer and whatever. It's very cool. And that's, the people are probably the best thing about Superbooth for me. So if you're going to be there, definitely let me know. You can hit me up on Instagram or here or in Discord or anywhere like that, and just let me know, and definitely come up and introduce yourself. And I will ask one favor: if you come up and introduce yourself at Superbooth, let me know who you are in relation to like what your name is on here, because I don't see people, their pictures very often on here, and you have random handles. So if you come up and say, hi, my name is Bob, I'm like, I don't know Bob. But if you say, oh, my name is whatever your name is on here, it makes it a lot easier to connect those two things together. And I love to meet up with people. And if you come to the YouTuber meetup, it's cool because you can meet with everybody. All of the kind of synth geek YouTuber people are all there, which is a lot of fun. And it's a cool chance to kind of talk about what we've seen last year. Last year at Superbooth, there was a lot of us that had missed certain things. And then when we would talk to other people, they would be like, oh, you have to see this. And because you can't possibly see everything and remember it all. And so they'll point out certain things. And it was funny. I don't know if you watched Liam Killen's channel on YouTube, but he's become a huge fan of the Oxy one as well. And on the very last day of Superbooth, when everybody was cleaning up, I was talking with him about it, and he hadn't seen it yet. So we walked over to the Oxy booth and I gave him a little quick demo, and I think it's kind of changed everything that he's doing, because it was pointed out to him by somebody else. And there were things that were pointed out to me by other people that I hadn't seen as well either. So it just adds a whole other layer to it, because we all have different things that we want to see and do. And there's a lot of live performances there that are really cool as well. So you'll see that coming up on my channel over the next 2 weeks. Will be a lot of things from Superbooth each day, including the things that I saw. If there's things that you want to see, or if you want me to take a look at while I'm there, again, I don't know everything that's coming out. So if there's something you heard about that you're particularly interested in, shoot me a message on any of those channels that I mentioned before, and I'm happy to take a look at it and see if I can include it in the coverage that I'll do. There's going to be some more videos about getting ready for the shows, travel, how I pack everything in the gear so that I can carry it on, what I bring, what I don't bring, and why I leave certain things out or bring it along with me. And then the actual travel vlog part of it, which should be a lot of fun as well. And then I'll be staying in Europe after Superbooth, and I have a show in Brussels on the 24th, I think. So between the 21st and 24th, I'll be traveling, going to Brussels, and hopefully going to Rotterdam and Amsterdam while I'm in the neighborhood, to go say hey to some people there. So if you're in that area, please let me know. I would love to connect, grab a beer, have something to eat, talk about this stuff or anything else. It doesn't have to be synth talk as well. And yeah, I'll be putting videos about that. And then I'll be traveling to Seattle again on the 25th for a show there on the 27th. So if you're in Seattle, definitely come to that show. It should be a lot of fun. Performing with a whole bunch of other hardware people. We have our own stage on an event that's there. It's a multi-stage event, and one of them is going to be all live hardware performances, and put on by Modbang. So EasyBot's putting that together. So he'll be there performing. I'll be there, and a few others that are from the kind of Seattle scene, which will be cool. I know Wet Paint is performing, which his stuff is fantastic. If you haven't checked him out, you should. Super groovy, down-tempo kind of housey stuff, which I really love. And so yeah, so that will be in Seattle, and I'll have some stuff on the channel about that as well. So yeah, that's about it. Let's see, any other questions in here? I'm like George Clooney and up in the air. Yeah, exactly. No shortage of things going on. Too much going on. I wish you could go this year, Rob. It would be great to catch up with you in person. Maybe we'll have a chance to grab a drink when I'm in your neighborhood, sometime between the 21st and the 24th. That would be cool as well. But yeah, if anybody's going to be in that area, that would be great. If not, if nobody else has any questions, I want to say thanks very much. It's been cool to have you guys here. Love doing these streams, and I'll do a couple more between now and Tuesday when I go, or maybe at least one more between now and Tuesday. And so if you've got other questions that you'd like to have answered, definitely put those in the comments of this video once it posts up on YouTube, so that way I can answer those questions, whether about the Digitakt 2, anything that it does, or not. Yes, Robin, let's catch up when I'm in the Netherlands. I will be in your area starting the night of the 21st and through, I fly out of Brussels on the 25th. So I will be in that area. So let's definitely catch up. Shoot me a message offline and we'll chat about it. Just attended Modbang in April, was such a great event. Oh, cool. Yeah, we'll definitely come to this one. It'll be a lot of fun as well. So thank you guys very much. Check out the Patreon, check out the other stuff on the YouTube channel. Send me any messages offline if you have any other questions, anything you'd like to cover, or anything that I didn't go over here, or anything that you'd like to see on the channel or in any of the vlogs or from Super Booth. And in the meantime, thank you guys for tuning in, and I hope it was helpful, and I hope you got something cool out of it, and hope to see you out at one of the shows or at one of the events. Thank you guys very much, and I will see you very soon. Take care.